So I would like to welcome our guests to this second Renewal Roundtable that we started in September with the first roundtable with occasion of the Lisbon workshop. We thought that was a good initiative that is worth to be continued in this renewal project, to have these conversations with experts that are working in territories that are very close to the ones we are doing in this renewal project. And for that reason, we have invited here three guests that I will introduce now. First of all, I would like to say a few words about the Renewal Marie Curie. The goal of Renewal is to address the complex issues related to affordable and sustainable housing from a holistic perspective, transcending the boundaries between scales and disciplines, in particular through the individual research projects carried out by the 15 early-stage researchers. We want to create a transdisciplinary research framework interlinking the areas. Sorry about this. The three areas, which are design, planning, and building, community participation, and planning and financing. In this roundtable today, we would like to focus on the design of affordable and sustainable housing, while keeping an eye to other interrelated issues concerning social and economic changes affecting the accessibility to housing, co-design and co-production of housing, and the need to consider design in a broader perspective as part of the overall building cycle. To discuss the issues here, we have our three guests today, which is Darinka Cizke, which is Associate Professor at the Faculty of Architecture and Built Environment at Delft University. Her research focuses on collaborative housing and urban planning, and also on socially sustainable urban development. Our second invited expert is Lisa Ayulo. She's in the other side of the Atlantic in the University of Pennsylvania. She's Associate Professor of Architecture at the Pennsylvania State University. And Lisa is working both in practice and research with residential green building and affordable housing, energy efficiency, and on strategies to implement renewable energy at the building and community scales. And our third speaker is Montserrat Pareja. She's Associate Professor of the Department of Economics at the University of Barcelona. And she specializes in urban development and its impact on social, cultural, and economic aspects. So first of all, I would like to thank the three of you for being here, for having time to be with us. That's very much appreciated. I think your conversation and the inputs you provide here will be definitely a good input for the research that our early stage researchers are doing. I would like to start this conversation asking you about how do you approach, through your research, the design of affordable and sustainable housing from this holistic approach we are trying to follow in the renewal project. So perhaps can start with Darinka, please. Would like to a 5-minute presentation only. Introduction, you can answer. Let's make a very short presentation, 5 minutes, and then we engage into possible conversation. So Darinka, you'd like to introduce yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Leandro. And indeed, I don't think this is going to be a presentation as such, because we were asked ideally not to use slides, but more of a personal statement, I would say, where we explain our perspective, respectively, on how we address the question of a holistic approach to housing provision. And I would like to start by saying that, well, I've been busy with housing issues for about 20 years now, and I've lived and worked in different countries. And the first part of my expertise in the field of housing was mainly about trying to make sense of different systems of social and affordable housing provision across Europe. As some of you might or might know, I led the European Social Housing Observatory for a number of years, where I travel around and met a lot of people in Europe who are providing affordable and social housing. And for the last 2 decades, let's say, I always heard people complain in all the countries I visited about the housing crisis. And at one point, towards the end of my PhD, because halfway through I embarked on a PhD at the TU Delft on social housing, towards the end of writing my PhD, I realized this is not a crisis, really, because by definition, a crisis is something which is short-lived, acute, and which at some point it will disappear or be integrated in the system somehow. Someone will manage it and it will become, somehow, as I said, part of our daily business. So I concluded that what we're really looking at in advanced societies like in Europe is a systematic or a structural failure of our housing provision systems to give answers, suitable answers to a number of changing housing needs. And at the same time, I started to pay attention to what I would describe as a growing reemergence of collectively self-organized housing initiatives. So basically, groups of people who were, on the one hand, not eligible for social housing anymore, because in many countries in Europe, as you know, social housing, so subsidized forms of housing, has been decreasing, and the criteria to access social housing are stricter and stricter. So these people were not eligible to live in social housing anymore. But at the same time, especially after the global financial and economic crisis in 2008, 2009, many people became excluded of the market options because, well, we know the story, the crash, the evictions, and stricter mortgage lending conditions. So I turned my attention and my interest, and I would add my fascination, to what people are doing together with others to provide housing by themselves, for themselves, and with each other. So this collective agency element is what really interests me in the current day and age, because you see housing protests everywhere. You see a lot of reports that over and over, I might sound cynical here, but I was one of the people who for many years produced these reports where we denounce the problem. But to be honest with you, and perhaps I want to be a bit provocative here, we know the solutions. We know how to get rid of the housing problem. Problem is there's no political will to implement the solutions. So I want to look at how people are organizing to challenge the system and to provide proof that you can build more sustainable, more affordable, and more inclusive and community-oriented housing when you do things differently. So this is what motivates me today to understand innovation, social innovation in housing.
Thank you very much, Darinka, for this introduction and explanation about your position. So now the turn of Lisa, please. Would like to go ahead?
Thank you. Yes, I had an opportunity to visit Nicosia many, many years ago. So unfortunately, I can't be there now, but I hope when we're able to travel again, maybe to have the opportunity to visit again. For now, I'm with you from Pennsylvania in the United States. For those of you who aren't familiar, it's in the northeast of the United States, and Penn State is the University Park campus, where I'm located, is in the geographical center of Pennsylvania. But we also have more than 20 campuses across the state. So I am a faculty member in the Department of Architecture, and I direct the Hamer Center for Community Design in the Stuckman School of Architecture and Landscape Architecture and the College of Arts and Architecture. And a little bit about Penn State and why this is important. So Penn State is a Research One university with a land grant mission, and that mission is to support the communities where we're located. So the Hamer Center for Community Design addresses affordability and sustainability as being directly related. So we work through a framework that's informed by the so-called triple bottom line of sustainability, so environment, economy, and equity. But we also work to address the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So specifically, of course, goal number 11, which is sustainable cities and communities, to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. But through doing that, we really work to address all of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So, of course, no poverty, good health and well-being, affordable and clean water and energy, supporting life, and that's all life, human and non-human, decent work and economic growth, and industry innovation and infrastructure, really thinking especially in housing about the way we build things, the technology that we use. And of course, working across scales to address climate action. So much of my work at Penn State has really been on applied projects and the integrative design of affordable and sustainable housing, looking at several demonstration projects here in the region, but also advising several teams on the international collegiate solar decathlon competition, which some of you may be familiar with, and is sponsored by the US Department of Energy, but is now held all over the world with students and faculty members from all over the world. And there were many, many pedagogical benefits to working on the solar decathlon. But one of the things that I really struggled with is how can the work that we were doing there really be impactful in our local communities? And so that's really been a focus of a lot of the work that I've been doing. In 2012, I founded the Energy Efficient Housing Research Group in order to try and address this question, and also to think about the fact that in architecture in the in housing in the United States, architects rarely have a role to play. And so I was really taken by a statement that I read by an author, Ron Devaney, in Architectural Research Center's Consortium journal article, where he said that there's a gap between the potential value of architects and their actual effectiveness in realizing widespread relevancy, innovation, and change in improving the quality and sustainability of affordable housing needs in the United States. And so this really drove the work that we're doing in the Hamer Center and through EEHR, Energy Efficient Housing Research Lab, which is an outreach arm with community of the Hamer Center, to take a transdisciplinary approach to housing design, bringing together undergraduate and graduate students and faculty from multiple disciplines around compelling issues that are informed by the communities that we work with, affordable housing providers, representative homeowners, et cetera, in order to address responsible housing, housing that is resource efficient and affordable to the people that are occupying the homes in the long and short term. So I guess I'll add just a little bit more about our approach, which is really informed again by something that really I think is aligned with that first statement, which was the preface to Richard Plunt's book on the history of housing in the US, where he talks about the need for integration between disciplines and really embracing an approach that has a consistent pattern of innovation, evaluation, and learning applied to the design of housing. And this really is important to the approach that we take. So Energy Efficient Housing Research Group, I use a Venn diagram to explain this, and that Venn diagram is comprised of design innovation, evaluation and performance of the projects that we realize, and of course, education and engagement. And so those three come together with energy efficient and sustainable housing at the center. But what's important to that is that it's an iterative loop, that we are learning from the communities that we are engaging with to inform the housing that is designed, then going back and making sure that we're not just walking away from those projects at the end of the day, but that we're monitoring, understanding how they're performing, learning from that, and allowing that to feed into the next projects that we look at. And so again, you know, I really think that this holistic approach that you all are talking about is essential, and we need to be looking at that in the housing, in the occupants, and what's happening within the buildings themselves, but also how those buildings are working across scales within the communities. So I'll stop with that, and then we can have a discussion from there.
Thank you very much, Lisa. So now is the turn of Montserrat. If you would like to say this 5-minute statement, please.
Yes, I will try to keep the time. Well, thank you first for the invitation and for the possibility of sharing some time with Darinka, that I know well, and Lisa, that I don't think that we have met in the past, and you, Leandro, of course. Well, I will do, as Darinka did, a little bit the history of why I am researching on housing. Yeah, everything is okay. So the thing is that in 1992, important year for Barcelona, where I come from, the Olympics, as you know, I was just looking for a topic for my thesis, which is something that I understand it's one of the most difficult parts of the whole process, to find the right topic. And I was interested on housing, maybe because of the Olympic Village. That was a new development in the city that was impacting the whole housing market. I am an economist. I don't feel very comfortable just talking about models and equations and data. So I thought that I needed some kind of different inputs from different people in terms of discipline. So from then on, I found my topic. I did my research in economics at the end of the day, but it was about the vacancy change and the filtering of housing in the city of Barcelona. But I thought, and I understood, that I couldn't look at housing without taking into account other disciplines rather than mine. So from the holistic perspective that you are somehow supporting, I would say that from the very beginning, I was very much interested in sharing that kind of thing with other experts. In order to do that, I think that maybe one of the first things is to reach an agreement on what we are talking about. I mean, we find a common language, because this is not very easy when we talk about even something like social housing, that all of us do have an idea of what it means, but of course, depending on the discipline, depending on the country, people feels different about the definition of social housing. So from then on, time flew, and I was involved in 2 European projects, and of course, coming from Spain, where the social housing percentage is so low. I mean, nowadays we are sort of around 2% of the housing stock, but it's definitely a very teeny percentage of the housing stock that is devoted to what we would understand social housing as publicly rented housing. We didn't have many, well, we still don't have many examples on cooperatives or other typologies of housing provision different. I mean, I will say a few words about innovative housing provision in Spain and in Barcelona in particular. But I decided that it was interesting to produce this kind of exchange with other people from other countries and other disciplines. And I was involved in 2 European projects. One was about the importance of the housing system in safeguarding social cohesion. That was a very short project, 3 years, I think, and we were looking at the relationship in between housing as one of the pillars of human development and social cohesion in particular neighborhoods. That was a very theoretical project. But then we moved into the second one with some of the participants of this project, which was the restructuring large housing estates in Europe, good practices and new visions for sustainable neighborhoods and cities. And the merit of this title is that that project lasted, I think it was from 2000 to 2004, 2005. So that means that we were already struggling with the built environment, because at that time we were not caring about new developments or new ideas or innovation in that sense. We were very much focusing on why some, in that case, large housing estates were redeveloped and were very successful, and why some others were a complete disaster. No? And we were trying to identify which were the success and failure factors in that regeneration process. Since 2000, I've been coordinating this working group of the European Network for Housing Research, which was called Sustainable Housing, Urban and Housing Sustainability. That was the title. We changed it recently into something a little bit more open, I would say, which was towards sustainable communities, a bit more, trying to emphasize a bit more the social aspect of communities, no, and this and the relationship, of course, because otherwise we wouldn't be in the European Network for Housing Research and the relationship with housing. So very briefly, I think that I am already over my 5 minutes, but I would just like to stress something that Darinka already said, and I totally agree, and it is not me, that was one of the outputs of this project that I was mentioning, the Restate project, that maybe the starting point of many projects or of many things is the political will. And that was one of the discoveries, if I may, and that means a lot, because and I will say a few words about Barcelona, because I think that nowadays Barcelona is a very innovative city in terms of housing provision. And Leandro, you are from Barcelona as well, so you're very well known. And I think that one of the differences of how things have evolved in the past and today is that there is a clear political will in terms of doing things differently, and give some kind of opportunities to these micro experiments that we understand that might not solve the problem of affordability, but they are definitely something to experiment and to see what is good and what is bad and what can be improved. In that sense, and I will finish with that, my municipality, the municipality of Barcelona, and the strategic planning of the metropolitan region of Barcelona, they are both very inspired by this idea that Mariana Mazzucato is sort of getting very popular, which is the mission-oriented policy. And I think that this fits well, and I think it would be very interesting in order to discuss the different questions that you were posing to us, which is that if we do have a challenge or a problem that has to be transformed into a challenge, and we clarify which are the missions, the clear, defined missions, measurable, evaluable, with capacity to be evaluated, and then we moved into this experimentation, I think that this is a process which is much more rich and much more innovative for sure, and that can produce lots of interesting things that otherwise wouldn't have happened. And I will finish with this temporary housing that won recently a prize in the Bauhaus competition, which is the APROP housing, the temporary housing, in order to keep low-income families in the same neighborhood in temporary housing that it's, of course, under the market rent, and it's very attractive. It's temporary in the sense that it's going to remain there in the neighborhood, but the people will move out. But it's a very adequate and I would say decent form of housing provision, and at the end of the day, very innovative. And I will stop here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much to the three of you for this introduction. About the research you are doing, also about how do you approach this complexity of affordability and sustainability in housing nowadays. From the comment of Darinka, it's very clear that the position about that the problem lies at the political level and not in another instances. I think that make very clear that statement. I think Lisa, on the other hand, I think put the focus on the responsibility of architects as professionals to be more active in order to solve the challenges of affordability and sustainability. And I understand from Montserrat that the issue of innovation, the issue of mission-oriented policies, in a way has also a political component, in a way, and also a social component, but also underlying the need of cities to be innovative. I mean, innovative in a way that satisfy the market-oriented needs, but also the political ones, like the example you put in Barcelona now. So I was starting by Darinka, maybe going on this line of political responsibility. I mean, you are working many projects on collaborative housing, co-design, co-production of space, and so on. To which extent and which scale these initiatives need to reach in order to become political? I mean, because, for example, at the levels, at the small scale, could be very successful examples of collaborative housing, co-housing, people coming together, even going beyond the scale of the building, starting a renovation process at this neighborhood scale. Things like that probably are happening. But the dimension of political, at which moment something that is an initiative at a certain scale can be qualified as a political action?
Thanks, Leandro, for your questions. I think there are two dimensions to this question, or to the answers that I would give. One is that I think that in many cases, but not all, the people who are involved in these initiatives, they have a very strong political agenda, or perhaps more than party political, what I mean is political is a change agenda, a system change agenda. So they are people who have very deep values towards societal change, so more social justice, access to the city, right to housing, you know, so they are very often even they're criticized for being very exclusive in a way, because they are usually individuals with high levels of cultural capital and social networks that allow them to actually engage in these pioneering initiatives. But on the other hand, we see that in my research shows that a lot of these people are also very much involved in movements, social movements, fighting for the right to housing, and also involved in mixed projects where less advantaged people are also part of innovative initiatives of co-production. Yeah, so this is one aspect. But the other aspect I would like to mention is that very often people who hear me talk about collaborative housing and so on, they say, yeah, but this is not going to solve the housing crisis. And I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. But that's not the point of collaborative housing. We have to have two parallel but very interdependent discussions here. One is what people can do by themselves and for themselves, and the other one is the state and its role to guarantee the right to housing for the whole population. And of course, individual groups are never going to solve that problem, because it's not up to them to solve that problem. As I said before, the first part of the question is many of them are also engaged in political action as individuals or as groups, but ultimately the responsibility for providing adequate housing to the whole population lies with the state, at least in the European context, where we have Charter of Human Rights and most of the constitutions have an element of a right to housing, right? So for me, it's a matter of keeping very clear the level of the debate, the level of the demand. Collaborative housing can excel at showing innovation in other domains of the quality of housing. For instance, a lot of the innovation on sustainability, recycling, sharing resources, circularity, they come from self-organized groups. Let's look at the eco-villages. There are many, Monse mentioned one of the awards given by this project in Barcelona, but there are many other awards that go to groups that try and test new approaches to become more circular and more sustainable, just to give an example. So what I would like to highlight is the potential, as in every field, not only housing, but also in other fields, the potential of people who think outside the box to produce something in a new way, in a way which is more sustainable or more inclusive or more community oriented or even more affordable, how to save costs through collective pooling of resources. I have a PhD a researcher who works with me, and she's actually doing her research about understanding if and how collaborative housing projects, which are based on collective decision making, can become more affordable than the alternative, meaning a mainstream housing projects for the same target group. So she's been busy 3 years now with different case studies in Europe, and she's using very developed models, economic models also, to test her assumption. We are going to see what she comes up with in the next year. So because we need more evidence. That's the other thing, that there's a lot of claims that are done, not only about collaborative housing, but any new innovation, you have claims. And what we need as researchers is to say, okay, hold on a minute, we need to collect the evidence to prove or disprove the claim. So we're busy with that.
Okay, thank you. And I'm glad to hear that you have a PhD in this line, because actually it's one of the lines that we are following here in some of the individual research projects. So maybe we'll have to hold another conversation about how this work in a way can be aligned with the one that starts here now. Continuing with Montse, now I think the answer of Darinka, I think, makes clear that the collaborative actions taken at the level of community, doing collaborative housing by people that are politically motivated, is one thing, one track. The other track is to guarantee the right of housing, which is a political action that has to be taken probably at another level, at the political level, in the political arena. I understood from your positive comments about the examples in Barcelona, Montse, that maybe in the last years, these two tracks, in a way, in Barcelona have come together in a way. There has been a very active movement, grassroots, cooperative housing, trying to find plots in the city to be developed with cooperative models. And on the other hand, they have found the sympathy of the political, the power, the municipal authorities that are now in power. And this conjunction, in a way, maybe is an example of how these two tracks can come together and make, to a certain extent, a change. Is that? Do you see it like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the question, because I think that many of the policy measures, and I think that this is important to clarify as well from the beginning, that if you have as a mission or as a target or as a challenge in your city or neighborhood the right to housing, then many political interventions can be legitimized by this challenge. For instance, as you very well know, in Barcelona, there has been a considerable struggle with respect to the control of rents. And let's say that as an economist, I would say that anything that controls the market is bad, no? Because you have an excess of demand, then the prices will be up, the supply will be desmotivated, no? But I think that in some cases, and I've been writing about that, certain measures have to be done in order to guarantee one of the, as Darinka said, a public statement like it's in our constitutional chart. We want to consider and to take into account the right and guarantee the right to housing. And I think that in the municipality of Barcelona, and I am more or less aware of the different strategies, they are promoting somehow these micro experiences. They are very well aligned with the activist movement, of course. I mean, our mayor was an activist in the past. But on the other hand, I think that and this is, I think, a nice contribution. They are trying to ideate measures that are not as traditional as they could be in the Spanish context, like, for instance, the public-private partnership to deliver social housing. This is something that has never been done in Spain, and nowadays there is, I mean, it lasted 3 years, 3 years to create a public-private partnership in order to combine the public effort together with the private developer, providing a reasonable, let's say, return to the private developer, but at the same time fulfilling one of the requirements, or if you want, one of the mission, which is to provide affordable housing in Barcelona. So yeah, I think that it's a magic moment, I would say, in Barcelona, and that is also connected with what is going on in the national government. I mean, it's easier to negotiate nowadays than in other periods of time.
Thank you, Jose. And now, going on the issue of what is the role of the architects in this context of cooperative housing, collaboration. I mean, Lisa was talking about the need of professionals to be more active, more effective in how to engage into sustainable development from the perspective of green building, sustainable building. But how do you see which capacities the architects need to develop to be also effective in this context we are talking about collaboration, about new innovative ways to address housing overall, not only from the point of view of architectural design, but also from the point of view of tenure, from the point of view of the involvement of the different levels in the design process? How do you see the role of professionals, Lisa, in this context?
Great, thank you. So just from our own work, we have researchers that are working on fundamental research around community sustainability and resilience. We work in partnerships with local government associations, et cetera, to try and really influence policy at a broader scale. And we also really work to learn lessons from the projects that we're working on and disseminate those lessons. But I think what's really important is something that Darnika said earlier, is that it's the process that is important. So communication is really difficult because in the United States, we don't have kind of the overarching ability to affect policy fully. And that is because, for example, in Pennsylvania, we're a commonwealth. So there are over 2,400 municipalities throughout the state. And the power to plan really lies in each of those municipalities, even the tiniest borough that has, very limited funds and access to information. So one of the things that we really strive to do is to really capture the process, capture the information that can be used in partnership with local housing authorities and providers, with industry, for example, contractors, to really help to understand these bigger ideas, how they can be informing new construction of housing, but also, the fact of the matter is the majority of the housing that is going to exist is already existing today. So how can we improve the energy efficiency, the performance of that housing? And so we try and capture both the best practices of construction, but also to understand the bigger process to really inform kind of the soft costs, if you will, of design and really being more rigorous in the design of projects in order to carry that through.
Thank you. I believe that we have 5 more minutes with Darinka, right? Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Would you like to make some remarks in the flow of the conversation until now, Darinka?
Yes, I think I can. I have this echo now. I don't know. Can you hear me properly or with echo also?
It's fine.
It's with echo. Yeah, now?
Okay.
I don't know. Well, yeah, first I had a little comment for Montse, because I've heard this argument that the intervening in the economy is wrong, yeah, because the market should work by itself. But I think it depends from which economic perspective you're looking at the market. If you read Kate Raworth, for instance, she wrote her book a few years ago about the donut economy. And she talks about rethinking the teaching of economics, rethinking the way we look at economics. Instead of economics per se, or to serve an abstract market, we should be looking at what do we as human beings need and the economy should serve the needs of human beings. So she turns it around. And I believe that, well, also you quote Mariana Mazzucato, there's a new cohort of economists who are thinking differently about the market in economics and the role of the state. So and the other thing is that let's remember that the housing market is an imperfect market. If you could leave everything to the market, half of us or more would be living in the streets, especially in a country like the Netherlands, where we see the house prices going up the roof, and the only government intervention, or the major government intervention at the moment, is tax incentives for homeowners. So I think that's a lot we can argue about the leaving the market to its own devices and the role of the state. I believe that the state does have a role, especially in societies who value, as I said, the housing as part of a human right. And well, in addition to that, I just want to say that, of course, I could talk much more at length about what is interesting to look at in collaborative housing. This is why I've dedicated the last 7 years of my working life to understanding these forms. And unfortunately, I do not have the time now to go more in depth into it, but I would welcome any maybe a follow-up invitation to talk to the students, to the PhD researchers about this, or any inquiry you might have about our recent research. And well, thank you very much again for having me, even though it was brief, but it's a very busy time over here in Delft.
Okay, thank you very much, Darinka, and we'll keep your word and try to find another moment for continuing in contact with you and with your PhD students. So thank you very much for being here.
Bye-bye, thanks. Bye.
Bye. So you like, Montse, and
Yes. Yeah.
You continue 2 minutes until
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
okay.
would like to comment on Lisa because about the role of architects, and I will, rather than moving around the macro spectrum, and I will not talk about economists anymore. But I think that it's very interesting when we look at the role of architects and the need that, and again, as in with economists, no, there are different typologies of architects, but going down into the experience of this research project, the Restate project, where we went down into the neighborhood and we saw how different interventions led by the Urban Planning Institute in Catalonia, in Barcelona, so they were all of them architects, and I think that one of the success factors in those neighborhoods that were successful in the regeneration process were in those particular cases where architects were working together with social workers. And that might sound even very simplistic because we all know that sustainability has 3 pillars, that holistic approaches require to get into account physical development, but also social development. But at that time, which is quite a long time ago, it was a clear factor of success when we had architects responsible for the regeneration of these large housing estates. In some cases, they were affected by a concrete pathology, which is called aluminosis. And they were demolishing, and of course, families living there were needed to be relocated in provisional housing, and they were going back to the new housing. So all this process needed a very, very interesting interaction that was only possible when architects and, of course, social workers were willing to work together. And we, I don't know, but we found out that that was possible, and also maybe from the technical point of view, not only social workers or architects, but also, and I will stress what you were saying, Lisa, about the community. No, in those neighborhoods that the community was taken into account from the very beginning, and I agree with you that dissemination is essential at the beginning of the process, along the process, and at the end, because people need to be informed and to understand what's going on and why they are suffering or experiencing different interventions. I would say that these were key factors for success, no, in terms of quality of life, new neighborhoods or good neighborhoods regenerated.
Okay, thank you. I would like to maybe change a little bit the direction in the few minutes we have now in about, I mean, the work that Lisa is doing in her research group. I mean, sometimes green building and sustainable building are sometimes used as synonymous in a way, but sometimes also a difference is established between both. I mean, green building is more focused on environmental issues, about energy efficiency, use of resources and so on, while sustainable building tries to take a more broader approach, taking into account other dimensions, social, economical, and so on. Sometimes we find this difference in the literature. And I was curious to read in your background that in your research group, you are using the term responsible housing as a term that encompasses not only affordable and sustainable, but also health. So I'm curious about why do you need to coin this term responsible housing, and why this need to create a new terminology here to bring the issue of health together with affordability and sustainability?
For a couple of reasons, I think. You know, the terms are used synonymously, so part of that is that many of the approaches that we take to achieve sustainable, more high performance homes, passive house strategies, etc., are directly, you know, linked to healthfulness in housing or creating more healthy indoor living environments. And so one of the things that we set out to do is to say, okay, if we're using these strategies and we are trying to address health as a part of our mission, are we actually achieving that, and at what level? So there's that aspect of, you know, the indoor air quality, particulates, et cetera, that are important. But there's also the overall living environment that we are thinking about. So connections to nature and the outdoors, the connections within our community to make sure that we're building in locations that are well connected to transportation, to jobs, to education, to other resources, and those kinds of issues. So you know, again, I think these scales are important, and really understanding the relationship of building to mental and physical health, and also to the health of the community, the continuity, the feeling engaged and a part of community that are important there. And I want to speak a little bit, because I think what's really important about the work that you're doing with Redwell is this transdisciplinary approach. The fact is, you know, we can't, as architects working in a silo, address all of these aspects of health, of durability of the products of that we are using, etc. It is really through working with other disciplines and also hearing what the community has to say and what is important to them that is important to the work. So that's really informing and a part of this term of responsible that I'm referring to in the work that you're asking about.
Thank you. I think it's a very interesting. It's interesting for us to see that other people working in a way under the same premises, with similar philosophy as the one we try to follow in this project, come up with different terminology or different ways to explain themselves. Well, we feel that we are touching on the same ground, but it's interesting for us also to see how you verbalize, how you explain these ideas with a different vocabulary. I would like to ask now Montserrat to go on the issue of affordable and social housing, which is another key issue here in this project that we are discussing over and over. I mean, these two terms, again, like in green building and sustainable building, we also have two pairs of terms here that sometimes they use synonymous, which is affordable housing and social housing, right? So they're not really the same, even though sometimes they are used with the same meaning. But let's say a few decades ago, it was only social housing. Social housing was what the state was supposed to provide in order to guarantee the right of housing that was recognized to every citizen. This, as the state has given up this responsibility and has been taken over by the market, then the term affordable has emerged and taken over the old social housing in a way. Nevertheless, this distinction between affordable related to the housing market and social related to the state is not so clear cut. I mean, there are some intersections between both, right? So I would like to, you talked before about the private-public partnerships, Montse. So I would like to know if you could elaborate more on that and how this connection between social housing, let's say, supported by the social state and affordable housing more in the hands of the housing market, how they can complement each other, how these private partnerships can be a way out to the housing crisis, which we heard before from Darinka. It's not really a crisis, it's a structural problem, right?
Yes, well, thank you. Well, a lot of questions, and I will try to follow a clear argumentation. Yes, that's true. I think that after the Second World War in Europe, social housing was, and the production of housing was the key element to enlarge cities, to reconstruct cities, and the focus was set on social housing, which took different forms depending on the European country. In Spain, we didn't participate in the Second World War. We had a different feature, a different device, which was called officially protected housing, which was could have been wonderful social housing stock, but it was qualified as social housing for 15 years. It was in the home ownership sector, and it was after 15 years sold by the state and privatized, like in many, I mean, during the transition in the Central and Eastern European countries, we could see that this privatization of the social housing stock had already happened in Spain. So in the Netherlands, for instance, the Housing Association or the cooperatives in the UK, so social housing evolved and adapted to the different contexts. And I think that this is something that identifies every country and clarifies the differences. So why affordability right now? Because I think that today the housing problem is not only structural, is reaching, and after the great financial crisis in 2008, but also after the COVID crisis, the housing problem is not only a problem of very low-income families or migrant families or single parent families or households. So it's reaching the problem, the affordability, the accessibility to get a shelter over your head. It's getting more and more generalized. And I think that this is the reason why it's not only about social housing itself, I mean, which is meant to be for those that they can definitely not afford any market rent or of course, any market price. But affordability is something which might be considered as an alternative to, let's say, traditional tenure forms. And let me explain that. We know in Spain, for instance, that we have a very simple tenure system. We have home ownership and we have private rented market housing. For many years, the private rented market has acted as social housing. Why? Because people that couldn't afford to buy a house, which was meant to be the usual thing, not anymore, thank God, but I remember asking my students of 18 years So which is your plan? Which is your expected housing career? And they said, oh, well, the first thing is I want to save and I want to buy a house. No, and of course, she or he couldn't buy the proper house, the right house in the right place when they were starting their labor career. No, but anyway, the thing is that the private rented market has acted as a form of social housing, and the boundaries in between the different forms of tenure have been sort of permeated, especially in between social housing and private rented housing. So the problem is getting bigger, because if the private rented market, which is meant to be or to provide affordable housing for people that are not in the position to buy a house, and they are, I mean, it's very, you can imagine, no, like a box. I mean, if the box is occupied by people that is in this private rented housing that cannot afford anything else, that they should be in the social rented housing, but they cannot because there is no supply. So the problem is affordability. Then these public-private partnerships that you were mentioning, I mentioned before, they have a long-lasting tradition, even in regenerating projects in the UK, for instance. I mean, it's not that strange that private resources together with public resources in terms of money, but also in terms of time, expertise, and so on and so forth, they go together and they operate in the neighborhood that they want to regenerate. But in Spain, we don't have this tradition. In fact, I would say that this is something that I already mentioned, very innovative, that has been organized. And it's, as far as I know, is the only municipality in Spain that has been organizing this public-private partnership. What is, I mean, very shortly, I mean, the private developer has the possibility to develop some new dwellings. The municipality provides facilities to land mainly to develop this housing, and the developer is committed to reserve part of the new building to affordable housing. So it's a little bit more complicated. I do have a long-lasting presentation on public and private partnerships. I know that we are out of time, but I think that this is, despite all the bureaucracies and all the difficulties that large, let's say, public institutions like the municipality of Barcelona or any other municipality, they are a possible solution for the future. I think that maybe not solving the social housing in terms of really, let's say, poor people that cannot afford anything else, but I don't know, people at the beginning of their housing career, that they need to get into the market, and that emancipation is very late in Spain. So this kind of strategies could ease this possibility.